Australians trust supermarkets more than almost any other business. But what if that trust is quietly costing you hundreds every year? Today, we're counting down the 10 supermarkets Australians should never blindly trust. And the only 2 that still play fair. This isn't about prices, it's about broken trust. At number 10, we start with a supermarket that looks like value on steroids. Costco has built a reputation in Australia as the ultimate money saver. Giant trolleys, warehouse prices, bulk buying that promises unbeatable value. For many families, a Costco trip feels like a smart, responsible financial decision. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For the average Australian household, Costco is one of the easiest places to lose money without realising it. The savings only work under very specific conditions. You need storage space, you need a large household, you need strict planning, and most importantly, you need to use everything you buy before it's spoiled. What most people don't realise is how bulk buying actually changes behaviour at home. When groceries are bought in oversized quantities, the psychology shifts. Portions get bigger, food gets pushed to the back of the fridge or freezer, and instead of being carefully planned, it slowly becomes invisible. National environmental data shows Australian households waste millions of tonnes of food every year, and a large share of that waste comes from food bought but never eaten. Fresh produce, meat and dairy are the biggest culprits, exactly the categories most often bought in bulk. That waste doesn't feel like spending. There's no receipt, no checkout total, it just quietly ends up in the bin. Studies on household food habits consistently show that the average Australian household throws away food worth hundreds, sometimes over $1,000, every single year. When you buy more than you can realistically use, the savings disappear long before the next shop. This is where Costco's value promise starts to unravel. Cheap per unit only works if every unit gets used. The moment food spoils, the price per unit becomes irrelevant. A half-price kilo of chicken that gets thrown out is more expensive than a full-price portion that gets eaten. Then factor in the membership fee. Before any savings are realised, you're already behind. You have to spend enough, waste nothing, and repeat that behaviour consistently just to break even. For large families with space, discipline and planning, Costco can work. For everyone else, the value is theoretical. That's why Costco isn't here for being expensive. It's here because the gap between what shoppers expect to save and what they actually save is far bigger than most people realise. Coming in at number 9, we have a supermarket that feels like the opposite of big retail. Harris Farm Markets presents itself as fresh, ethical and market style. Wooden crates, chalkboard signs, handwritten prices. It sells the idea that you're paying more for better food. But when you look closely, that story starts to crack. In multiple supplier interviews and produced supply chain investigations, it's been shown that much of the fruit and vegetables sold at premium grocers often come from the same packhouses used by major supermarket chains. Same farms, same distributors, different price tags. Yet Harris Farm regularly charges 20% or more above major chains for comparable produce. Taste tests and shelf life comparisons often show little meaningful difference. What you're really paying for is atmosphere, branding, and the feeling of shopping better. There's nothing wrong with wanting that experience, but trust breaks down when price implies superiority that isn't consistently delivered. Harris Farm isn't on this list because it's premium. It's here because too often the premium is cosmetic, not practical. At number 8, we move to a supermarket many Australians want to trust. Foodland wears its local pride loudly. South Australian born, community focused, supportive of local producers. That messaging resonates strongly with shoppers who want to do the right thing. But good intentions don't pay grocery bills. Foodland's smaller scale means weaker buying power. National suppliers offer better terms to major chains. Those discounts don't reach Foodland shelves, and the difference lands directly on shoppers. Independent price comparisons repeatedly show that pantry staples, cereals, pasta, canned goods often cost noticeably more than at Coles or Woolworths. What those comparisons don't always explain is why the prices vary so much. Independent supermarkets don't buy like the big chains do. They don't negotiate directly with manufacturers at national scale. Instead, many rely on a wholesale middle layer to source products, set terms, and manage distribution. That wholesale structure limits bargaining power. When suppliers give their biggest discounts to the largest buyers, smaller chains and independents are left paying more for the same products. Those higher costs don't disappear, they move straight onto the shelf. That's why two stores with the same branding can feel completely different. One might secure a good local deal or run sharper pricing. Another, just a few suburbs away, might be locked into higher wholesale costs. The logo stays the same, the prices don't. This is why shopping at independents can feel unpredictable. You're not just comparing supermarkets, you're comparing supply chains. And when the supply chain changes, trust becomes harder to maintain. There's rarely a quality difference to justify the gap. For a quick top-up, Foodland can make sense. But as a full weekly shop, those small differences quietly stack up week after week. Foodland isn't untrustworthy because it's local. It's untrustworthy because the branding encourages loyalty without consistently delivering value. Sitting at number 7 is SPAR. It exists in an awkward middle ground. It's not a national giant, but it's not fully independent either. And that creates a problem for shoppers. These stores rely on wholesale supply arrangements that limit their ability to negotiate deep discounts. That means everyday prices tend to be higher, promotions are thinner, and specials are less frequent. Unlike premium supermarkets, they rarely compensate with superior quality. Unlike discount chains, they don't deliver clear savings. The result is a supermarket that costs more simply because it lacks scale, not because it offers more. It isn't evil, but it's a reminder that independence alone doesn't automatically benefit shoppers. Often, customers quietly subsidise the disadvantage. Now at number 6, things get complicated. IGA is one of the most inconsistent supermarket brands in Australia. Two stores can sit kilometres apart and feel like completely different businesses. Prices vary wildly. Quality swings dramatically. Product range depends entirely on the individual owner. This inconsistency makes trust impossible. One location might offer excellent produce and fair prices. Another might charge significantly more for lower quality stock. As a shopper, you never really know what you're walking into. That unpredictability turns budgeting into a gamble. The problem isn't independence itself. It's that the same logo promises reliability the system can't deliver. You can't blindly trust it because the experience changes from store to store. At number 5, this is where opinions split. Aldi is often described as the cheapest supermarket in Australia. Choice basket comparisons consistently show lower totals, and many Australians swear by it for good reason. That finding matters, and it's worth being clear about it. Independent testing by consumer groups has repeatedly shown that it comes out cheapest when you compare a standard grocery basket. Same list of items, same quantities, no specials applied, it usually wins. That doesn't mean the data is wrong, but it does mean the data has limits. A basket comparison only measures the price of what's inside the basket. It doesn't measure what happens when the basket isn't enough. It doesn't account for the second shop many households need to make to finish their groceries. And it doesn't include the extra time, fuel, and impulse spending that often comes with that second trip. So yes, it's cheaper on a controlled basket, but real households don't shop in controlled conditions. Once the full week is factored in, the savings depend entirely on planning, discipline, and whether one store can realistically cover what a household actually needs. That's not a flaw in the data, it's just the difference between theory and real life. There's also a hidden cost: limited range. Most locations carry a fraction of the products found in full-line supermarkets. That forces many shoppers to make a second trip elsewhere. That second shop adds time, fuel, impulse spending, and higher prices. The initial savings start to erode. Produce quality can also be inconsistent depending on delivery timing and store turnover. When something runs out, there's no alternative brand to fall back on. It isn't bad, but it isn't complete. You can trust it on price, You just can't trust it to cover everything. Cracking the top 4 is a name most Australians never see: Metcash. If you shop at IGA, Foodland or SPAR, you're paying Metcash, even if you don't know it. This company controls supply access, pricing structures and product availability behind many independent supermarkets. Compared to the major chains, its negotiating power is weaker, and those higher wholesale costs flow downstream to the shelf. You never see it on the shelf, you never see it on the receipt, and that's where the system starts to matter more than the store. Supermarket pricing doesn't move randomly. It moves quietly and usually for a reason. Promotions exist not just to offer savings, but to shift attention. When prices rise in small increments across hundreds of products, most shoppers don't notice. A special tag draws the eye, while the base price underneath slowly resets higher. This is also why loyalty pricing became normal. What used to be a reward has turned into a requirement. The regular price climbs. The member price looks like a discount and shoppers feel like they're saving, even when they're just paying what they used to. None of this requires bad intent from individual stores or staff. It's structural. When a small number of companies dominate supply chains, wholesale access, and shelf space, pricing behaviour becomes standardised. Costs are pushed quietly through the system. Margins are protected upstream. And transparency is the first thing to erode. That's what recent competition inquiries have focused on. Not one supermarket, not one decision, but patterns that emerge when market power is concentrated and competition is limited. So when prices feel confusing, inconsistent or hard to track, it's not because shoppers aren't paying attention. It's because the system isn't designed to make prices easy to understand. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding why some supermarkets feel permanently expensive, even when they try not to. Trust breaks down when the real decision maker is invisible. At number 3, this one will surprise some people. Woolworths feels safe, familiar, polished, consistent. Many Australians trust it without thinking twice. And that's exactly the problem. Shrinkflation has quietly crept across staple items. Packages get smaller, prices stay the same. Sometimes they rise. Unless you check unit pricing carefully, you won't notice. That's because shrinkflation is designed not to be noticed. Instead of raising prices outright, manufacturers reduce the amount inside the package. The box looks the same. The branding stays familiar. The price often stays identical. Sometimes it even drops slightly, just enough to avoid suspicion. What actually changes is the unit price. You get fewer grams, fewer servings, or fewer uses for the same money. And unless you're checking the small print on the shelf label, it slips straight past. Consumer groups investigating grocery pricing have identified multiple everyday products affected by shrinkflation. Breakfast cereals, snacks, household goods and pantry staples quietly shrink while the shelf price holds steady. Over time, those small reductions add up to a significant increase in what households pay per unit. This is where loyal shoppers are hit the hardest. When you trust a brand or a supermarket, you stop scrutinising it. You reach for the same product you've bought for years. Same packaging, same habit, same assumption that nothing has changed. But something has. Shrinkflation doesn't rely on deception. It relies on familiarity. It works because shoppers don't expect trusted products to change in ways that hurt them. And when a supermarket has strong brand loyalty, shrinkflation becomes easier to hide. The relationship itself becomes the cover. This isn't about one product or one week, it's about a pattern that quietly shifts value away from shoppers over time. By the time it's noticed, the new size has become the normal size. That's why shrinkflation is one of the most effective, and least visible, ways grocery costs rise. Not with a shock, but with silence. Woolworths hasn't collapsed overnight. Trust has eroded slowly, quietly, and deliberately. At number 2, we see the same pattern repeating. Coles sits just behind Woolworths, and for many of the same reasons. The branding suggests value and reliability. But behind the scenes, pricing behaviour has shifted. Specials distract from rising everyday prices. Pack sizes shrink. Fresh food consistency varies more than it used to. The issue isn't any single decision. It's the pattern that matters. One promotion on its own doesn't mean much. One smaller pack could be coincidence. One price rise might be justified. But when the same changes repeat across dozens of products over months and years, a pattern starts to emerge. This is where many shoppers feel worn down. Promotions arrive constantly. Half-price labels, limited time specials, member prices, bonus points. The noise becomes overwhelming and eventually people stop checking. That fatigue is important because once attention drops, subtle changes are easier to push through. This is very different from how Coles used to operate. For a long time, the brand was built around simplicity and clarity. Prices felt stable, specials felt occasional. Shoppers didn't feel like they had to constantly second-guess the shelf. That feeling has shifted. As with other major chains, consumer groups have flagged repeated examples of shrinking pack sizes and changing value propositions across everyday items. Not once, not twice, but often enough to change the baseline. The result isn't outrage, it's resignation. Shoppers don't storm out, they adapt. They assume this is just how supermarkets work now. And that's when trust quietly fades. Because when value becomes harder to track and consistency disappears, loyalty stops protecting shoppers and starts working against them. That's why this isn't about blaming one decision. It's about recognising the pattern before it becomes invisible. Coles still feels like the Coles Australians grew up with, but it doesn't behave like it anymore. And that gap between perception and reality is where trust breaks. And at number 1, the worst supermarket for blind trust. Not because it's worse than the rest, but because it's trusted the most. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The supermarket Australians most often trust by default is also the one most likely to quietly cost them more over time. Not because it's the most expensive, but because it's the hardest to question. Between loyalty pricing, promotional noise, shrinking pack sizes and market dominance, major chains have trained shoppers to stop checking. And when you stop checking, you lose. This isn't about boycotts, it's about awareness. After all of that, surely someone must be doing it right. There are, but only 2, and even they come with conditions. At this point, it's important to be clear about something. Earning trust as a supermarket is hard. It doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean being the cheapest. It means being consistent, transparent, and predictable over time. That's why this list is so short. Most supermarkets don't fail because they're evil. They fail because small compromises pile up until shoppers can no longer tell what's fair and what isn't. So when we talk about the 2 supermarkets that are worth it, this isn't praise without conditions. It's recognition of clearer rules, fewer games, and fewer surprises. Not flawless, just more honest. Aldi earns its place here because the trade-offs are honest. Low prices, simple shelves, minimal fake promotions. You know what you're getting and you know what you're giving up. If you plan carefully, avoid unnecessary second shops, and accept limited choice, Aldi delivers real value. Not perfect, but transparent. Drake's doesn't chase headlines. It focuses on stable pricing, consistent quality, and fewer pricing tricks. Shoppers report fewer surprises at the checkout and better reliability in fresh food. It's not the cheapest. It's not everywhere. But the rules don't keep changing. And in today's supermarket landscape, that makes it rare. This list isn't about where you can shop. It's about where you should never blindly trust the price on the shelf. Because the biggest cost in Australian supermarkets isn't always on your receipt. It's in what you don't notice. Which supermarket do you trust the least? And why? Let us know in the comments. And if this helped you shop a little smarter, like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.